Our conversation today brings us back to Mohonk Mountain House in New Paltz, New York. We are going to talk to Denny Laine, who starred with the Moody Blues. He helped form the group in the early 1960s, and in 1964 they had their biggest hit called Go Now. Denny's conversation today, we're going to talk about his experiences with Wings, with Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney, and what he's doing lately in his career, still performing as the Denny Laine Band. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Since you gotta go, oh, you better go now, go now, go now, go now, go now, go now. For you see me cry.
That's the hard one to get to before you see me cry, right? That note in your voice.
For you see me cry. Yay, baby! Denny Laine, Rich Siegel.
Hey, Rich.
Nice to meet you. We got a chance to speak a few minutes before we came on, and it is a pleasure. I think everybody's familiar with Denny Laine, but for the little background on Mr. Laine is that he is the founder of the Moody Blues. His first band was Denny and the Diplomats. He later went on to a 10-year stint as one of the lead vocalists and guitarist, bass player also in the group Wings with Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney. Mm-hmm. And he's still performing today as the Denny Laine Band, and probably most well-renowned for a #1 single in the UK and a huge hit in the United States in 1964 with the Moody Blues called Go Now. We were singing it before we got on. If we have any B-roll later, it was great. And we were talking today, before I let Denny tell his story a little bit, we were at Mohonk Mountain House in New Paltz, where we have filmed before, and we've taken a tour of the place, and Denny is enthralled, enamored, really enjoying.
I feel at home already.
It's a great place, and he has a connection with the Hudson Valley. Usually the people we're talking to have some connection with the Hudson Valley. He's very friendly. He's played with, we don't have to name drop, but it's every big name you can think of.
I'll be name dropping later.
He'll be doing a name dropping later. But Todd Rundgren, he's performed with, Dylan, obviously the Beatles, Friends, all of that stuff. But this area, through Bob Dylan, through Todd Rundgren, he's performed at the Bear before. Never had been to Mohonk. And we're having a good time.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Thanks, Denny. Thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure. I'm really knocked out by this place. Yeah.
Cool. Let's go right back to the beginning. Okay. Birmingham, England.
Yeah.
You were born there.
I was. The land of the Quakers, believe it or not. And I believe this place is connected to all that.
It is.
Bourneville chocolate, Cadbury's chocolate, yeah.
It very religious roots here at Mohonk. Really? Same with your family, growing up, parents, working class,
yes, definitely. My mother was very religious, but we had a good laugh. We weren't really sort of narrow-minded people. After the war, we always just sing and joke and have family get-togethers. Everybody had a piano in those days, and they were working class, but at the same time, they were showbiz people too. My parents were vaudevillian based people, and my sisters were all dancers. One of them went to America even.
All sisters, brothers?
One brother was in the Navy for 10
Three
years.
Sisters?
3 sisters. I was brought up on their music actually, and I got my name Laine from my sister's a big fan of Frankie Laine. So I was part of a thing where I was the youngest kid, and all their music I grew up with, whether I liked it or not. All right, I was listening to it, and so I had a very eclectic, from classical music, Mario Lanza, to K-Star, Wheel of Fortune, Frankie Laine's, Johnny Ray, all that stuff, but I was really into Django Reinhardt as a kid, and my parents also, we had a piano, played a lot of piano music in the house. things like Charlie Coons and people you've never heard of. But I was brought up around all these influences.
So with that family influence, as a young person, you were in love with music right away and knew that's what you wanted to do?
Well, again, you know, there was a ukulele in the cupboard.
That's the first instrument you learned to play?
Yeah, I didn't know how to tune it, but yeah, you just mess around, you know. When you're part of a big family like that, everybody kind of, you know, you don't care whether you're any good or not. You just be part of it, you know.
Next instrument after the ukulele?
Well, a cheap guitar, like a very cheap guitar.
Taught yourself?
Yeah, again, didn't know how to tune it, but when a friend at school's brother was a jazz guitarist who taught me how to tune it, and taught me a lot about the Django Reinhardt gypsy music. Now, my old man, I never knew this till later in life, came from a gypsy heritage. Many years. He didn't travel as a gypsy. He was actually with the St. Jude's hospital because he couldn't walk as a kid. So I found this out later, and that's where I know I got my sort of traveling genes from, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, but gypsy jazz was big with me, and I kind of followed that. But at school, I got into joining a band called Johnny the Dominators, and I became this other person then. I was like part of that whole early rock thing.
Denny and the Diplomats, your first band.
Yeah.
And your actual birth name was Brian Hines.
It was.
So they gave you the name Denny and Diplomats. How'd that happen?
Because people used to put that in front of their bands, you know, Rory, Storm and the Hurricanes. Ringo was in that band.
Ringo Starr was in that
band.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of bands that made their names up because, in a way, you know, you didn't want anybody to know who you were. It wasn't.
It was about the band more than Brian Hines.
Yeah, who's Brian Hines? That's not a name for a band. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So, but it stuck with me. I did actually have a little, like we used to have a shed in the backyard. There's an old Nissen hut, like a bum shelter. And I started to play around a little bit with friends, and we called it the Den. So the name Denny came from that.
Cool. So you guys, there wasn't a promoter giving you Denny and the Diplomats.
No,
it was something you came up with.
Yeah, and you know, you dyed your hair and you did all the things. I was I was 12 when I did my first acoustic thing, and it was a Lonnie Donegan song, you know, a solo thing. And then in a band, say when I was about 14, 15, I started to become something else. But prior to that, I was singer-songwriter or a skiffle.
You were writing songs too, between 12 and 14, or trying to.
Yeah, trying to. There was a guy called Lonnie Donegan who was huge, and actually, Justin Hayward was managed by Justin. This is a small world, right?
Yes, it is.
Comes back later. Lonnie Donegan was a big Irish folk singer who became huge, and we all followed him and Cliff Richards, and that's the English version of what you did in America with Elvis and all those people. But we were into that kind of music, and the first song I ever sang was "Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor on the Bedpost Overnight?"
I've heard
you
that
want
song.
a little rendition of I was 12, right? Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? And your mother says, don't you swallow it in spite. You catch it on your tonsils, you wiggle it left and right. Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? Brought the house down.
That went to #1 when?
Not by me. Lonnie Donegan had a huge hit with that one.
Yeah, it literally was a pop hit.
Yeah, but those are the influences we had. It was T-chest bass, and you couldn't afford instruments in those days. You know
the little I know about rock and roll and the British invasion and you know the Beatles, Moody Blues, the Stones, the blues is always there. It's always where they all come back to the blues. Your biggest influences, you said Elvis. And on the blues side.
Yeah, and Elvis's big influence, obviously all the black blues players.
Sure.
You know. I have to say this without wanting to be, you know, unpolitically correct. We were totally into black music because we could be. In America, is a little bit more, you know. Yeah.
They shunned that. They shunned the blues a little more because it was associated with black people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in those days, we were the purveyors of black music. The Moody's actually backed up Sonny Boy Williamson and a few of those people in Paris, and we were quite big in France because of our blues roots. And so, you know, I always tell a story about Sonny Boy Williamson was kind of a big influence on us. And they all lived in Europe and therefore, you know, encouraged us to be what we were. And recently I was with Taj Mahal and I was playing him my new song. And he said, "You still got the same sound that you had in the Moody Blues." I said, "Yeah, because that was our thing, us copying you and being influenced." And he says, "And we used to copy you too. We were influenced by you." Yeah, he said, "You." So that was big with us.
Bouncing off
that
each
was
other
big
in a
with
lot of
us.
ways.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to the Moody Blues right now because we talked about Denny and the Diplomats was your first band.
Yeah.
And that progressed into the original Moody Blues, correct?
It did.
And the name Moody Blues, we're back to the blues, was you, Mike Pinder, one other gentleman.
Ray Thomas.
Saying, you told me how the Moody got into the blues, but.
Yeah. Well, the short story.
Yeah.
They were in Germany with the Beatles at playing the same circuit, really, at that time, because they're a little bit older than me. Came back and wanted to put a band together to go back to Germany, because that's where the music was. You got to remember that after the war, you know, Germany was settled by the American forces, and the American forces network in Germany had all this great music coming across. So that Radio Luxembourg played music for them. We picked up on that. We got that music in England. So in actual fact, your people were getting the music that we were influenced by, is what I'm saying, the army. So Germany was big on British music and American music because they all spoke English in school. That was the other thing. So then we therefore had a lot of work in Germany because of that. The Beatles and other bands went out there because of that, to play at
Hamburg or...
Absolutely, or also to play at the army bases and stuff. So anyway, that's where we wanted to go, or the Moody's wanted to go back to. And I said, well, I'd rather go to London, that's where it's all happening, and that's why I left my band to go with these guys.
Which turned out to be a very, whether you call it lucky, diligence is the mother of good luck, but it was the right move to go to London.
It was. Well, we actually got discovered. We were playing blues, and we were just getting to the point where, you know, I was saying, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go to London, we're going to go to Germany, and it was all sort of that stage. Then we got discovered, taken to London by, you know, because in those days people used to come and look at talent scouts, looking for bands and stuff. And these guys were actually connected to the Beatles earlier with a company called Celtab, which was Beatle concessions and, you know, memorabilia to the company. They came up, took us to London, put us in all the best places, really, via their friends and influences, you know, like you do. And of course, then we met the Beatles again in London, and became friends.
You had known them before that, even.
I'd met them before in England, in Birmingham, my hometown. But then, and they'd met them in Germany. So again, we got together in London, and it went from there, and we became really close friends. Prior to anything to do with Wings, we were actually neighbours. We had parties. They'd play us at their stuff. We'd play us. You know, it was that kind of thing. And so that's how I knew Paul, really.
So we're in 1964. You're with the Moody Blues, and you're knowing that. I'm just getting a little ahead. The Moody Blues have already had some success, and you do a cover of a song called "Go Now," and that goes to #1 in the UK and is a major popular song hit in the United States also, as everyone knows. And really, that is the takeoff in a way for you're the lead singer on that song. That's the signature song you've known for forever. What's that feel like too? That, you know, not stuck on a song, but that a song is associated with you. What's that about for you?
Well, first of all, it was an original by Bessie Banks, who I met recently, and she was very happy that I'd covered that song because it helps them. But I always liked the original. But it was a piano song. We picked it because Mike Pinder played the piano. It was a Moody Blues thing. And so it was a huge hit, actually because we were on the Chuck Berry tour in England, which is a tour that's run by Robert Stigwood, who eventually manages Eric Clapton and all these people now, and was in with the Bee Gees with Brian Epstein. Anyway.
He was involved with those.
Oh,
We
yeah.
talked about Brian Epstein before. He was involved with the Bee Gees too. I didn't know that.
Exactly, through Robert Stigwood. So anyway, we go and do this tour, Chuck Berry tour. It's huge in England, of course. And during that tour, when you played live, when we were a good live band, and everybody had to be good. You know what I mean? It was all gigs. And when we played live at a lot of these places, they would go out and buy the record because they'd see you on stage. Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce were in a band that opened that tour. So I met them through.
You were in a band once called the Ginger Baker Band, weren't you?
Oh, Ginger Baker's
Well,
Air
not the
Force.
Ginger
That was
Baker.
later, but that was again...
Let's stay where we were, but I just said...
associated with my meeting him then.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we ended up going to the top of the charts because of that tour. So Chuck Berry, he even borrowed my amplifier. Thank you, Chuck. But it was,
And so at that
that's
time,
how we were.
you're in England,
Yeah.
not necessarily part of the English invasion to the United States, because you guys never ended up really touring at that time. You didn't come like the Beatles did come,
Not at
and
that
Herman
time.
Hermits and whatever other groups were. But still, you were in that culture, hanging around with all of those people and rubbing off each other and doing that same thing. Did you feel like then that you were on a sky? I mean, you're 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Was it too early? Was it? I mean, what did you think
Not
was
for
going
me.
on?
No, I was already pretty seasoned by 19, believe me.
So you enjoyed it.
I left school and went to be professional. Boom, I mean, I always think that, you've got to just do music. You can't do everything else. You've got to have one job, and it has to be music if you're going to be that. A lot of people think, oh, I got this job and I do that on the side. Yeah. I don't think you really...
Not to get where you
No, you just have to make it your life. And in those days, there was no money in it, and see what I mean? It was all about trying to be famous, really. And
It was about ambition.
Yeah, it was.
At the end
it
of the day.
really was. There's a lot of talent around. Believe me, there are more bands in England than sliced bread. It was just that.
Love of music and the ambition? I'm putting words in your mouth.
No, totally, love of music. But you had to have the ambition to... Well, what you did was you'd go on the stage with the band, like for example, I was on with the Yardbirds one night, and they were opening for us, and Eric comes off, he goes, beat that. And we go on, and we try and beat that. And it's all about you...
Eric Clapton in the Yardbirds.
Yeah, so you get that feedback, and you try and, compete.
A lot of fun.
Friendly. And then you become friends with these people. Then you're playing all the same gigs, and then, years later you're still friends because you all came through that same
You were in shows when, with the Beatles performing before you were next, or whoever it may be. Chuck Berry, you said you toured with him. You toured with them all.
Yeah.
Played with them all.
Yeah, that's what you do. That's what you do. And then you're in the clubs in London because you're all from out of town anyway. And so you're all having a laugh and drinking, and having fun and talking a lot.
Here's something I always wonder about, Denny, is that athletes, rock stars, movie stars get famous and rich at 19, 20, young, without a lot of formal education. I always say that's a recipe for disaster. How did you handle it?
Well, the fact is that you don't go in there after the money. Even though John Lennon said, we're in for the money, but you don't go, it's not the money. And if you don't we never made money, not at all. I mean, it looked like we did. We were working, we were looked after, there was money there, but we were managed by people who didn't know what the hell they were doing either. We didn't really know that much either. When you get to that level, you just go with the flow, and nobody knows what the hell, how that gets spent, what happened there. These stories are rife in the business, you do know that, right?
Yep.
So, basically, if you don't make the money, you walk away from it, you say, well, where's all the money? But they go, well, we don't know really what happened, but so you go on to something else. Yeah, you go on to something else, but your ambition is still the music and trying to be progressive musically, and, just do it again. You don't get out because of that. But it always comes full circle back to the music, and you've got to make a living, obviously. But you, and times change musically. The business changes. I mean, look at the way it is now. Yeah. You can't make the same money you used to then either. Okay. You have to be a businessman and a musician and everything else.
and it's hard to learn. My point is, it's very hard to learn to be a businessman at
Yeah.
20 years old.
It really is.
Without a lot of formal education or,
Right.
or a lot of experience of who's trying to get. Your passion is the music and having a good time.
Well,
and the money is kind of like, let someone else worry about that.
Yeah, right. And there was a lot of that with record labels, because the record labels weren't really into music that much. You know, in those days, all classical music. George Martin, for example, was not into rock bands. He was the first one to actually, and we worked with Decca, who had no clue. So we had our own people. And like, if you think about it, we had like our roadies became our managers, or became, you know, business people with us.
Sure.
Because we trusted them. And you couldn't trust.
Roadie manager right here. What's that?
You couldn't trust
the story.
That's
You
exactly
couldn't-
the story. The trust comes first.
Exactly.
You got to
And-
be friends with the guy. You got to
Right.
live with him. You got to be able to know you're going to see him tomorrow morning and the day after, and you're going to be
Sure.
on the road with him.
That's right.
Makes sense.
And then you're always talking about what the next move is, stuff like that. You know where you stand.
Between 64 and 66, you're still. I'm giving. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Still with the Moody Blues, and around that time. You're going to go in different directions because of the music, the type of music they want to play. What
Not really.
split you from the Moody Blues and took you on your own?
Well, the same thing that took me from Wings to being a solo artist again. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to continue the writing side of it, and not just be a band that goes on the road and works the same gig every night, you know, same set, you know what I mean? Move forward. Once you become famous, everybody's seen your act. What do you follow it with? See what I mean? So it's very difficult for years of being that to go into something new. I wanted the Moodies to be, you know, a studio band more then than go on, keep on the road.
Doing the same
At
act.
that time, they didn't want to do it. So I said, well, we never fell out. I just said, well, I'm going to do it. So anyway, they did what they did, and they got lucky in another way, and that's another story. And I decided I would go in that direction. I had a big hit, actually, with a song of mine with Colin Blunstone. I was now a songwriter. Colin Blunstone from the Zombies had a hit with his song called Say Don't Mind. And it kind of established me now as a
Would
writer.
I recognize that one? Because you know I know a lot of
well, I
let's hear
can
that
play a
one.
bit of
Let's
it.
see.
I realize that I've been in your eyes some kind of
I've heard it. Keep up. Yup.
what I did, stupid fish are trapped in pool.
Yup.
I've been doing some whining, I'm doing some fighting, so say you don't mind, let me
That's
up
it.
this time.
And that was on the charts in the United States at some point?
Yeah, Colin had a big hit with that. But, you know, now I'd written a song that well, actually, he did it later than my version. But I formed a band around that, and I called it Electric String Band. 2 violins, 2 cellos. It was kind of a take on the Beatles, George Martin sort of ideas, you know, classical mixes.
And stepping up with what the kind of music you're putting out,
Yeah.
not back to your bubble gum sticking on a post, not so much the bubble gum, a little more orchestration in the background.
Just try something progressive, that's all. So anyway, I did that at the Jimi Hendrix show, and Paul, John, and Peter Asher were in the audience, which led to Wings. So
Wow. So we'll get, that's a good segue into
We've jumped
60,
a few
70.
mountains here.
The Beatles break up, whatever it is, you're out there and you already have a relationship with Paul McCartney at some level. You knew each other. He gives you the call.
Yeah.
And says, Denny, I'm forming a band.
Do you want to put a band together? That's exactly
Literally.
what his words were.
And you
yeah.
went like, yes, right away.
I
or
said,
you
well,
"Let me think
I'm
about
in
it."
between bands at the
Is that what it
moment.
said? Why would I want to join Paul McCartney?
Something like that. Something like that.
What
yeah.
was it really? What did you say when he called?
I said, well, I did say that. I said, well, I'm not doing anything else.
So
You
let's
know,
do it.
Let's have a laugh. And I went up to Scotland and we did.
And
You know, I
we-
mean, I kind of gave up my own career, which sometimes I regretted in some ways. But I thought,
in a lot of
well,
ways, 10 years.
Yeah,
You know,
but-
and you know, you're a star or in the music business yourself, and you're really going to now take a back seat in a certain way to
absolutely.
one of the greatest rock and rollers commercially and successfully in the history of rock and roll, and his wife, who isn't necessarily a
Not
musical
musician
talent at all, but they're going to have some fun, and you're going to be the guy kind of, you know.
Yeah, because he knew me.
Right.
See, if he picked someone else who he didn't know, he probably wouldn't have felt so comfortable to do something like that, which is to start again.
Yeah.
So don't forget that because of all that Let It Be situation and the Beatles and Alan Klein and whatever, Peter Asher at that time was working with them too.
Yep.
Oh, I'm still friendly with now. They didn't know what the hell they were going to do next, you know. So Paul was kind of sitting there in Scotland going, oh, let's have a few drinks, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I helped him to come out of that as he helped me to come out of what I was doing. See, because my band was, all right, they're string players. They were touring the world in orchestras and stuff. So I didn't have that much freedom with that. But I'd already established myself with it. But I really wasn't, you know, going that far ahead. And I thought, well, if I get together with him, well, I didn't think this. It was just a natural thing. I knew that if I got together with Paul, that we'd come up with something that suited us both, you know, at that time.
Which is interesting that, and you, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Wings started in 71. The first few years, or the first album, were a little, I say rough, didn't do well, or the audience didn't respond much for a couple of years. So were you nervous?
No. The reception wasn't there, but that's because, you know, what it is with bands is, I hate to say this, but it's all about the band enjoying the music. And we don't really care whether people like it or not, to start with. No. You just go up there, you think, well, we're going to get good, and it's good. They're going to like it eventually. So that's really the attitude we had. Yeah.
And even Paul was thinking the same thing. I'm thinking at that time, like, hey, so what? We liked what we did. We're next.
Yeah, we're not professing to be, you know, the best band in the world right now. We're just starting again, and maybe, you know, the fact that we did these university things where we turned up and played to an audience to just get ourselves into it. That, you know, it was kind of out of the press. There was no pressure on us at that point. And the album was just to give an idea of this is where we're at so far. And then, of course, we progressed into other things.
And as you progress and you're making the next album, I'm assuming you and Paul co-wrote a lot of the songs, or you were involved together writing the songs?
Very much involved with the arrangements of the songs to start with, and not so much the writing. He was trying to encourage me to write more.
Was he that fantastic of a lyricist that he could write those songs? And where did, when your
he
opinion,
was just prolific. He got that from being in the Beatles, you know. I got it a little bit from being in the Moody Blues. But he got it from being in the Beatles because, hey, be honest, the only way you could really make money in those days was by writing your own songs.
Right. Not covering.
Not covering and being, you know, well, if you had a hit with your own song, you know you can follow it with another hit. You go, you know, and then it's your individuals, you know, then.
And you've written how many songs in your life?
Well, a few hundred, I would say.
A few hundred, right.
Yeah.
And without getting too sidetracked, because I'm very interested in songwriting, what's the, you know, like, you think of so many songs and you start with the word something, you start with the word tomorrow, you start with the word yesterday. And it's not that hard, you wouldn't think, but it is what I'm saying. But is that the beginning?
Songwriting is a way of expressing yourself. That's what it is. But when you're traveling and you're seeing everything, you're writing about everything around you. You're almost like a teacher in some senses, or like a documentary person.
Yeah.
You're documenting your life. And if you can make a living doing that, great. So that's what a lot of bands did.
In their songwriting, they're documenting their life in a certain way.
Yeah, and it's easier to do than sort of copying somebody else's album. You know, even to this day, you always feel a bit guilty about covering somebody else's song, in a sense, you know. But you adapt it to your style. I mean, Elvis, we know, did everybody else's songs.
Right.
But he brought out the country and the rock thing and an R&B thing and brought it into that. Well,
to his own thing.
We were more like folk, early American rock and blues. So all those influences come in. Paul came to me with an idea, and we had a huge hit with a song called My Love Kintyre, which was, because we were in Scotland, I was at his house for breakfast, and he was playing around on this idea, and I said, well, Mile of Kintyre. I went, that's a hit. He said, well,
that's one song I'm not familiar with, and I know you said it was a huge hit, and it was a hit in the United States. Let me hear that.
It's
Can
a
you
very
remind?
simple song. I mean, but it was with bagpipes. Mile of Kintyre, oh mist rolling in from the sea. My desire is always to be here.
Little Danny boy, little Irish folk. Nice.
Yeah, Irish folk. Ireland was right over the water. In fact, that part of Scotland, they're half Irish and half Scottish. The pipe band comes in, it's a huge hit.
Yeah.
Just because we're allowed to do what we want to do, and we're not governed by, the authorities of record companies and whatever.
Right.
So, you get to that point where you stick your neck out and you do
Nice
what you
place to
want
be.
to do.
A lot of freedom.
Exactly.
And with Wings, with doing that, no matter who wrote them or whatever original songs, you had 14 top 10 hits in the United States,
Sure.
6 #1 singles. And that's really impressive. If you stop and think, 6 #1 singles with that group of Wings.
Right.
And playing in front of, even with the Moody Blues when you were on
No,
tour,
we
you were
never
playing.
did anything like
You
that.
were in mega shows now.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, we went from being, as I say, we started out in universities. We'd turn up, they'd charge them 50 pence, which is like half of $1. And the audience would be the students, and they would just be there, come and see you. They wouldn't believe it was going to be Paul McCartney in their house. So we would play to them, and then eventually we'd work up to a tour of Europe, and then we'd tour, then
So
a
you were
world.
like sneaking into colleges.
Yeah.
And nobody knew. Well, that must have been pretty cool.
It was pretty cool, but again, there was no press involved, and we got good doing that. Then we got another band change, somebody else joined, and we kind of went up and down a few times with band members, but at the same time we were leading up to the big arenas. And in those days, there was only us and Led Zeppelin and people like that, and The Who maybe. Those kind of bands
in
were
that
doing
mid-70 periods that were going out and putting
Yeah.
on
The big,
in a stadium, maybe
yeah.
even 60,000 people.
The
you were
stadium.
doing.
Well, the biggest one we did, I think, in those days was Seattle, 80,000. But
Superdome in Seattle.
yeah, but you don't. It's just like being on stage anywhere.
Didn't matter in 80,000 or 400
No,
like today.
no, not really.
Same
Well, actually, we didn't like the fact that they were so far away, because you're
Right.
so
Not
used to
enough
playing up to an
intimacy.
audience and having that feedback. Whereas, like with a big thing like that, you're kind of presenting something you've worked on, lasers, great sound, all that thing, visual.
At that point, were you a good enough businessman in your own mind? Did you make a lot of money in that Wings period when those albums were doing so well and the
Yeah.
singles were there? There was,
Oh
there
yeah,
was money
for
to be
the
made.
first time in my life, really. But again, that's dangerous too, because as Ringo says, well, we did a lot of shopping.
We did.
Yeah, but
Yes.
but
Which family during that time, kids and
yeah,
did
the
you have
whole
kids?
hangers on, the whole bit. But not bad. It was like I met a lot of people who were friends and taught you other things. It's like when you're young, you can't afford to do a lot of this stuff. When you're making money, you can. Suddenly you become like a big kid again.
Yeah.
And you try all these different things, boating, horse riding, this stuff. But for me, it detracted me a lot from the music again. And consequently, I wasn't in the music business as much when I left Wings, for example.
Right. 10-year run with Wings. And,
Yeah.
And I said family before. Have you been married before?
Oh, yeah.
Couple times? 3 times?
Once before.
Once. How many children do you have?
I got 5. I'm a family man, but I'm also a musician. And it's, the family becomes part of the music, really. The me being part of a family, sort of traditional family thing. And that's always been, with a lot of people, a problem. Because, families, they want to put the kids here. They want to go to school there. They want to music business is transient. You've got to take everything with you.
It's
See
tough
what
to
I
have
mean?
a stable family, I would imagine.
It is.
Where you're home for dinner at 5 o'clock, 3
Ah,
nights a
well,
week.
it
in front
doesn't-
of-
it- well, it just
or,
doesn't
you're
work
going
like
to Johnny's soccer games, or you're,
Yeah.
well, let's take a vacation, because
Doesn't work
it's
like
got to
that.
work around when the tour is, when you're in the studio,
Right.
and the passion. You said something interesting to me, very interesting about that. and it does kind of relate to family and other that the music business. You didn't use the word you're married to it, but it was you insinuated it was 100% of your being has got to be there to really get to where you got to or wherever it is.
That's what I'm saying. Let me just interject one thing. My kids, even though I never said, to them, go into the music business, or, you know what I mean, like you come from a family, they want you to be a lawyer, they want you to be a doctor. They just naturally went into it without me being the influence so much on a daily basis.
So no matter what you thought was going on or how much was
in
there, it was in their blood and it was in their spirit, and that's what they saw. Dad did this. It's in there,
and then they understand. They understand, they get it, and when they're doing it, they really get it. They don't feel like they're cut off from you. And as I say, I always think that in some ways parents can hold their kids back so much, from what they really want to do.
So Wings, 81 is done. Without getting into details, Paul McCartney, 10 years is a long run. First, let's start with 10 years is a long run with a band. The Beatles, even they were performing for maybe more than 10 years, but they didn't tour long like you did with Wings. Wings, you were touring the whole time. So that's a long run. But it does, you leave before Wings dissolves, is that correct? Or did tell me what happened at the end, how did Wings end?
Well, as I say, we went through different personnel changes, and most of the time I was the person who found the people. I found Henry from Joe Cocker's band. Jimmy McCulloch was actually found by one of our roadies. But, the people, Lawrence and Steve, I found, and there's 3 incarnations. And we went, but me and Paul really, but because had that history, we're always like that.
We're literally good friends.
Well, we were like tight and wanted to be musos. We wanted to be, pros. You know what I mean? It wasn't so much of a friendship.
You already were.
It was all like, hey, we want to do
each
this.
Other better. You want to.
It was one of those. So we stuck together through thick and thin and brought people in, and some of them, wanted to go off and do other things, whatever. But we had that unit. So at the end of all that, we won't go into it too deeply, but Paul got stopped with a little substance on him.
I remember that.
I can't remember what it was. But, so he ended up in jail, and that was it. Like, well, wait a minute. We were going to go to Japan 5 years ago. Now we can't go to another 5 years. That's what happens with visas.
Right.
So I said, well, I got an solo album I'd been working on. I'm going to put it out, see what happens. And I kind of did one of those. It's still deep down, you want to just come up with new music. That's all there is to it. You want to be influenced by what's around you, young bands coming along and helping them.
What's your favorite young band right now? A couple of them.
That's a long question. Well, you see, I don't really so much listen to the music as much as I used to when I was younger. But there's I used to like bands like the Counting Crows, say, a few years ago. I like Train, people like that. Bands that still have that live thing about them that we were like. You see what I mean? Yeah. So any band that comes out now that has paid their dues on the road, that kind of thing. Not so much in the studio. I know guys who've never been on the road, but they make records, as such.
The road is you got to get out there,
you got to
put it out there live, and you got to win the audience, and you got to give a show.
Right. So any band that's doing that now, I'm all for, and they are coming back because I hate to say it, but the music business is gone. You can't sustain yourself financially unless you go on the road.
Right.
Because everybody's downloading and stealing and.
Right. So you got to have people come in and pay for the performance to see it, and pay for merchandising or whatever else.
See where the money is. See where the money is, like the old days, yeah. Well, and that's come full circle, thankfully.
Back to where that's where the money is, which is good. Butch was kidding me before I wrote something about favorite albums, so I just wanted to ask you this quick. And he had one of the bands, and I said Rumors, and he laughed at me. Favorite album?
Well, funny enough, the band. Music from Big Pink was one of my all-time milestone albums. As it was, everybody had that album in their collection. You know what I mean? In those days.
The band from the Big Pink.
Yeah, the music,
which was
music from Big Pink.
Well, they recorded it in a studio in Woodstock in a pink house or something.
Well,
was that the story?
That was the story.
Basically, there was a house rented by Rick Danko and Richard and Garth. And Garth set up a studio in the basement.
Yep.
And they would come over, there would be a typewriter, and Richard Manuel would write 3 lines on a typewriter, and Dylan would write 3 lines.
Yep.
And all night long they would play. And
Yeah,
it was
sure.
horrible pink siding on the house, and it's music from Big Pink.
It was a milestone.
And you would consider that one of your best, one of your
it was
favorite.
a milestone
Yeah.
because it was different to what everybody was doing. You know, it was like experimental, but it was very, very musically, you know, very together. It wasn't like junk. It was, everybody was good players, you know. They knew what they were doing, great harmonies, great feel. That's the thing. See, the thing about a great band is the feel, and that takes a while to come. Me and Paul had that automatic feel.
Because you knew each other from back.
Music we grew up with, what we were influenced by. Yeah. But just be able to get it together and bounce off each other without, you know, losing it. See what I mean?
Sure.
And that's what that album did for me. But again, as I say, I would go out with Paul a lot in London, and we would go and see Dylan. We'd go to his hotel.
This is in the 80s or when you were younger?
This is prior before Wings. And we would go and see whoever was coming into town. A lot of American people came to London to be discovered, actually.
You today still go out, the Denny Laine band. I don't mean like still, but you're 73 years old and you're still performing 4 nights a week, 3 nights a week. You're still going on tour. You're still writing songs. Is that, you know, some people give you the answer, well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Is that your, why?
It's because of it's also the feedback. Yeah, you know, you get a lot of people coming along with their kids, the grandkids. And the grandkids come to you and they say, we love your music. And you go, how do you know it? Well, my granddad used to play it when I was growing up. And they become our fans now. It's unbelievable, actually.
It's gotta be.
And a lot of those kids are into playing live again. When they see you playing live, they go, yeah. See, because they might have been brought up through whatever stage of the music business where it was all computers and, you know, he didn't play live, all that stuff. As soon as they see us again, that's what they want to be. So the outside influences never took over the real drug, which was the adrenaline.
So that is the real
Never
drug.
really. Well, certainly not with me. Certainly not with Paul and anybody, really. Although you get the reputation for being worse than you are a lot of the time. You know, whatever the Beatles says, everybody's saying it next. And whatever he does, they're all doing it next. But I say, it's never as bad as people think. And as much as we were experimenting with everything in those days, you know, really, seriously. It's always a sad thing to me that a lot of my friends, and not to be morbid, are no longer with us because of that problem. Keith Moon, Hendrix, you know, Jimmy McCulloch from Wings, because they couldn't really handle it. But you know, when you're not working or you're not getting paid, a lot of that stuff comes into it, you see.
What do you think got you through that? I mean, you obviously were part of that whole thing where you could have been one of those statistics. In your side of you, what do you
my
think got you
family
through that?
probably.
The foundation.
Yeah, the thing of like, you know, my mother was pretty religious, you know, you couldn't swear in the house. It was all that kind of upbringing that they didn't need it. You know, I mean, they never even drove a car. You know what I mean? It was like we were taught to be, you know, professional and not get into fights and stuff. It was all that kind of thing, and you keep that with you.
Was it as fun and wild as the people from the outside when you look back? I know it's a lot of hard work, but the whole ride of the rock and roll scene and the Moody Blues and Wings and being in part of not the invasion of but being around all those people in the 60s, the rock stars. Was it as crazy as we imagine?
It was pretty crazy, but it wasn't as crazy as people imagine. That's all I can say.
Right.
Yeah, because, you know, look, you do an interview, right, with the newspaper. It doesn't come out exactly how you said it. There's always an embellishment of every story. Well, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Right. But, yeah, we were on the cutting edge of a lot of things that needed to be done in those days. We were kids. We were in a situation where people were looking at us, watching us, following us, being inspired by us, and we were out there, you know, dealing with it. But as I said, it was always something like a unit, family, partnership, you know, looking out for each other. Whatever it be, whether we're getting stoned at a party, or whether in the pub having a drink, or, you know, watching all this craziness going on around us with people we'd never been used to being around, like rich people, aristocrats, you know, whatever. It was another world to us, and we guided ourselves through it, you know. But we never really let it get to us to the point where we didn't know what we were doing.
And you've got to have some appreciation.
Music
Sitting here
does
today,
that for you.
Music is what did it for you,
Yeah.
and you always remember that.
That's right.
And the appreciation, sitting here today, knowing that you have all of those memories, and you got to do what you were passionately in love with
Sure.
as a career, and became famous and made money, and that wasn't what it was all about. But never had a day job. Let's go to that line.
I did for a little while. I was but I was a trainee buyer in a music store.
Is that
what I mean?
okay? Is that
So
when you were really young?
Yeah,
before?
but that's when I decided, hey, I can't do that and be on the road. So again, but you have to pick what you want to do. I mean, that's what you have to do in life, I believe.
Danny, before we finish up, I'm going to throw out just one word, and give me a sentence when you hear this. First of all, Moody Blues.
Well, Moody Blues was a unit that took me to places I've never been before, and I'll never regret any one day of it. You know, they're great guys. They still are.
John Lennon.
John and I were pretty good friends. We used to go out and go and see bands, stuff like that. And John was an outspoken guy, but in a very loving way. You know, he didn't deserve what he got because it was misinterpreted the way it was. Because everything he said, he wasn't selfish about.
Your dad.
My dad was a big influence on me and got me my first guitar, you know what I mean? My first motor scooter, put me on the stage with the pantomime company, and yet he didn't sort of push me into it. He was my role model in one sense, but I was his too.
Really interesting. You know, to say that, because you know, it's a good one. If you had a couple things to say right now, where's your biggest contribution to this life? What would they be?
Well, obviously, it's always, you know, being able to have a kid. That's the biggest thing.
It's number one.
Well, it is because you know, you're following through. You're giving somebody life to sort of carry on, whatever. I mean, it's a great achievement. But at the same time, you know, friendship, closeness, people that help each other, who are not evil, that you know, not looking for ulterior motive, not trying to live off you. You know, equality.
At your age, and I think all our viewers can relate to this as you get older, it was such a good run, you know, your life. Do you feel like, wow, I mean, or is it just a satisfying feeling? You know, I know you got a lot more to go and you want to keep going.
I'm never satisfied.
But that's right. So that's good. So in other words, looking back, you're not going, there's not that there's regret looking back, but there's, wow, I want this to continue. Yeah. Obviously, we all do, because you keep playing. You love it. Is there some of that, like, hey, I am near the end, and I'm sad about it?
No, because the older you get, the more you want to do it. The less time you've got to do it. All the things that you haven't done, you want to do. You want to be more positive. You want to be more helpful. You want to make sure that you're doing it right. You know, as long as you get your health. But that's what gives you your health, I believe.
And you talked about personal things when you said the older you get, the better you want to be. You right. As a star musician we'll fairly call you a rock star, you're talking about the things you want to become better as Denny Laine.
Oh yeah, I mean I really want to inspire people to do what I did, and that is what they want to do.
find their passion and chase
Yeah.
it and go
That's
with
really what I try to do with everybody.
it. Which people have a hard time. They
Do, man. Half the time they
get
don't know
like-
what they want to do, but you can see it more than they can sometimes. Or your friends help you to see you. You know, it's the same thing.
Listen,
Correct.
sometimes.
Correct. My man.
That was great, Denny. Seriously, appreciate it. It was
All right.
really something special. Thank you. Thank you for doing it.